The wind carried the scent of rain and rot as Samuel stood before the barn. Villagers had warned him, their voices hushed, their eyes wide with fear of the cursed place. But Samuel, a man more interested in a good deal than old superstitions, had bought the property anyway. The barn, its wood weathered to a skeletal gray, seemed to sag under the weight of its own history. He pushed open the heavy main door, and a cloud of dust billowed out, thick with the smell of hay and memory. Sunlight, filtering through cracks in the roof, illuminated a single object, a sturdy, iron-bound chest nestled in a corner. He approached it, the floorboards groaning under his weight, and with a grunt he pried it open. Inside, beneath a tangle of cobwebs, lay a stack of leather-bound journals. The ink on the pages was faded, the handwriting spidery and elegant. Samuel opened the first one, and a story, both agricultural and deeply human, began to unfold. The journals belonged to a man named Silas, the barn's original owner. They were filled with intricate diagrams of crop, rotation, and detailed notes on soil enrichment, methods so old and forgotten. They felt like magic, but nestled between the farming wisdom were Silas's confessions, each one a whisper of grief. He wrote of his children, a boy and a girl, lost to a swift and brutal illness. He detailed the long, lonely days spent toiling in the fields, the barn his only confidant. He spoke of the guilt that clung to him like a second skin, a feeling that he had somehow failed to protect them, to keep the sun shining on their young lives. Samuel closed the journal, the weight of Silas's sorrow settling in his own heart. The barn was not cursed. It was simply broken, a monument to a father's grief. Samuel, a man of quiet determination, knew he couldn't just use the journals for his own gain. Silas's sorrow felt too real, too heavy, to simply be treated as a manual. The land itself seemed to be holding its breath, waiting for a different kind of healing. He spent the next few weeks working the soil, but not in the way he'd planned. He followed Silas's ancient methods, nurturing the ground with care. He mended fences, not just to keep livestock in, but to honor the meticulous craftsmanship of the past. He worked from dawn until dusk, his hands growing calloused and his muscles aching. A quiet tribute to the man who had lost so much and yet had given everything to the land. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in fiery hues, Samuel sat on the barn steps and reread a final entry. Silas had written of a secret, a place where his children's favorite flowers once grew. He'd confessed that, in his grief, he'd let the patch wither and die, a final act of surrender. He had wished for a way to bring them back, to see color bloom in that small corner of the world once more. Samuel rose, a new sense of purpose filling him. He wouldn't just be a farmer. He would be a keeper of memory. The next day, he began to clear the overgrown thicket that choked the area Silas had described. He unearthed a few hardy remnants of the flowers, their roots tangled and starved, with the patience of a man tending to a wound. He nurtured them, giving them water and light. Slowly, painstakingly, the patch came back to life. A few weeks later, a single, delicate bloom appeared, then another. Soon, the corner of the field was a riot of color, a vibrant testament to new life. A silent conversation between two men, separated by time but united by a shared respect for the land and the lives lived upon it. The villagers still whispered about the cursed barn, but their words were changing. They spoke of the new farmer, the one who had brought life back to a place of death. They saw the fields thriving and the beautiful flowers blooming, and they started to believe that perhaps the barn wasn't cursed after all. It had just been waiting for a bit of care. The whispers of the villagers transformed from fear to curiosity, then to awe. They saw Samuel's fields, greener than any in the valley, and the patch of vibrant flowers, a shock of color against the weathered gray barn. People began to stop by, not to gawk, but to ask questions. A young farmer sought advice on crop rotation. An elderly woman, whose memory stretched back decades, confirmed the location of the flower patch, her eyes misting over as she recalled Silas's children playing there. The barn, once a symbol of sorrow, had become a landmark of resilience. It was no longer the cursed barn, but Samuel's barn, a place where the past was not buried, but honored. Samuel, however, felt a deeper peace than simple admiration could provide. He had fulfilled a silent promise to a ghost. As the seasons turned, He continued to follow Silas's journals, finding a profound connection with the man he'd never met. The barn held more than just journals. It held a legacy. He discovered hidden compartments in the walls, each one containing a small, hand-carved toy or a child's drawing, tiny, heartbreaking relics of a family once whole. One stormy night, as rain drummed against the tin roof, Samuel opened the last journal. The final pages were filled with Silas's trembling handwriting. He described a buried treasure, not of gold, but of a different kind of wealth. He had painstakingly gathered and preserved seeds from every plant on his farm, a living library of his life's work. He'd buried them deep, near the oldest oak tree, hoping that one day someone would find them and use them to carry on his work. Samuel grabbed a shovel, his heart pounding with a sense of purpose. He didn't care about the storm or the late hour. This wasn't just about farming anymore. It was about completing a story, giving a final, profound gift to a man who had lost everything. He found the spot, and in the muddy soil, he unearthed a sealed glass jar, filled to the brim with a rainbow of seeds. Samuel clutched the heavy jar, the seeds rattling like tiny polished stones. He could have kept them, used them to make his farm the most prosperous in the entire valley. The temptation was there, a whisper of a future where his land would be unrivaled. But as he looked out at the rain-swept fields, a different vision took hold. He thought of the weary faces of the villagers, their fields struggling with old, tired crops. He thought of Silas, a man who had lost his family but had held onto a hope for the future, burying this treasure not for one person, but for anyone who would have the wisdom to use it. The seeds were not a reward. They were a trust. The next morning the storm had passed, leaving the air washed clean and smelling of earth. Samuel went to the village square, the glass jar held carefully in his arms. The villagers gathered around him, their expressions a mix of curiosity and skepticism. "I found these," Samuel said, his voice steady. "They belong to Silas. They are his legacy." He explained the journals, the sorrow, and the hope that had led Silas to preserve these seeds. Then he did something that no one in the village expected. He didn't just show them. He began to pour them into small hand-woven pouches he had prepared. He gave a pouch to each farmer, describing the unique properties of the ancient grains and vegetables they contained. "These aren't just seeds," he said. "They are a promise from the past, a way to heal our land together." At first there was hesitation, but seeing the sincerity in Samuel's eyes, and recalling the miraculous flowers blooming by his barn, the farmers began to accept the gift. The old woman who had remembered the children's flower patch took a handful of the seeds and held them like jewels. That spring, the entire valley became a tapestry of new growth. Fields that had been fallow for years now flourished with crops of surprising color and resilience. The grains grew taller, the vegetables more vibrant. The collective prosperity brought a new spirit to the village. Farmers helped one another, sharing knowledge and celebrating their shared success. The cursed barn became the heart of the village. It was a place of pilgrimage, not for fear, but for gratitude. The villagers would gather there, sharing stories of their crops, and the incredible generosity of the man who had honored a ghost. Samuel never sought credit, simply finding satisfaction in the thriving community. The barn, which had once held only the echoes of a family's grief, now resonated with the joyous sounds of a community reborn. It stood as a silent, powerful testament that some of the greatest treasures are not found in gold, but in the forgotten wisdom of the past, and that the deepest sorrow can be the foundation for the most profound new life. The seasons turned again, and with each harvest, the valley's gratitude for Samuel deepened. The barn, no longer a place of quiet sorrow, buzzed with life. It was a community hub, a place where farmers traded stories and shared their bounty. Yet, in the quiet hours after the sun had set and the last person had left, Samuel would sit in the barn, the gentle scent of hay and old wood his only company. He had to become a master of the ancient farming ways, his knowledge a blend of Silas's wisdom and his own hard-won experience. But he never forgot the man who had taught him. One evening, as he was mending a loose floorboard, he noticed a faint carving on the underside of a support beam. It was a single, elegant letter, an S. He felt for it with his fingertips, the wood smooth from countless years of passing hands. As he looked closer, he saw a small, hidden latch. He pressed it, and a tiny, narrow compartment slid open. Inside, on a folded slip of parchment, was Silas's final, brief note. It wasn't a confession of grief or an instruction on farming. It was a simple message, written with a steady hand. To the one who found this, thank you. Now it is yours, Silas. Samuel held the note, a lump forming in his throat. It was the final piece of the puzzle, a last act of surrender and hope. Silas had not been consumed by his sorrow. He had simply been waiting for someone to care enough to carry on. Samuel's journey had started with a cursed barn and a deal, but it had led to a friendship with a man he had never met, and a deep understanding of a legacy he was now proud to call his own. He was no longer just the owner of the barn. He was its keeper, a bridge between a sorrowful past and a hopeful future. The barn wasn't cursed. It had simply been a house of waiting. The note was the final piece of the story, a perfect, quiet ending to the journey that began the day Samuel bought the old barn. The bond between the two men, separated by a century of time, was now complete. Silas's legacy was not just in the fertile fields or the blooming flowers. It was in the thriving community and the transformed life of the man, who had found his purpose in an abandoned place. The story has now come to a beautiful and peaceful conclusion. We've seen Samuel transform the barn, the community, and himself, all while honoring the memory of Silas. The cursed barn is no longer a symbol of sorrow, but a beacon of hope and a testament to the power of human connection.